Chapter 1, The Lonely Queen. Faderera's point of view. The kingdom of Ilujin stretched far, its walls painted with red earth and its courtyards echoing with the rhythm of drums and the clang of blacksmiths' hammers. To the outsiders, the palace of Oba Aramoro was a fortress of wealth and power. Its high walls were carved with symbols of victory, its courtyards lined with statues of warriors, its chambers scented with burning incense. Yet behind the grandeur, a shadow hung heavy. The king, once the lion of Ilujin, was now a husk of himself. Age had bent his back and robbed him of the thunder in his voice. His body trembled with sickness, his nights broken by coughing fits that shook the palace walls. Though he still wore coral beads and gold anklets, he was more ghost than monarch. It was into this world that Faderera had been thrust. She was the last of his wives, given in marriage not from love or desire, but from politics. Her father, a minor chief desperate for the king's favor, had traded her youth for fertile land near the Oru River. The day she was presented to Oba Aramoro, drums had beaten, praise singers had shouted her beauty to the skies, but in her heart, she had wept. Now, barely 20 years of age, Faderera lived in a golden prison. She had the finest silk wrappers from the coast, beads that clinked on her ankles, oils that made her skin glow in lamplight. Maids attended her, older wives sneered at her, and the king, too frail to claim her, lay coughing in another chamber. At night, when the palace slept, she lay alone on a wide bed, the silence pressing on her chest until she thought she would scream. Loneliness was her closest companion. But it was not just loneliness, it was hunger. She was young, her blood hot, her body restless. Her father had stolen her maiden dreams of love, and the king offered her nothing but titles and cold jewels. She longed for a touch that was not wrinkled and weak, for laughter that was not forced, for warmth that was real. It was during one of those long stifling evenings that she first heard him. The sound drifted into her chamber like a breeze, the low hum of a man's voice. It was not the chants of palace priests nor the drumming of warriors. It was a song, deep, haunting, threaded with sorrow and longing. Faderera rose from her bed and went to the lattice window. In the courtyard below, slaves worked by torchlight. Some carried water, others chopped firewood. Among them, one man stood apart. He was tall, his muscles taut from labor, his skin glistening with sweat under the flickering flame. His hands moved with practiced strength as he pounded yam, but his lips carried the song, rising and falling in rhythm with each strike of the pestle. That was Badero, a slave in Ilujin, but something in the way he held himself betrayed dignity. He did not shrink into shadows like the others. He sang as though his voice belonged to the night itself, as though even chains could not silence him. Faderera gripped the wooden lattice, her heart quickening. His song was unlike anything she had heard in the palace, neither praise nor flattery, but raw emotion. It spoke of rivers and wind, of home and loss, of a freedom she could almost taste. Her breath caught in her throat. She should not linger. Queens did not watch slaves. Queens did not let their hearts stir at the sight of sweat on a man's back or the sound of his voice cutting through the night. And yet, she could not turn away. For the first time in many months, she felt her body awaken, her pulse quicken, her lips part slightly, her chest rise with a hunger she did not name. The song ended, and Badero lifted his head, just for a moment, as if sensing unseen eyes upon him. Their gazes nearly met across the courtyard before Faderera drew back, her heart pounding wildly in her ears. She pressed her back against the chamber wall, her hands trembling. "This is madness," she whispered to herself. "He is a slave, I am a queen." But that night, when she lay on her bed, she did not dream of jewels or silks or palaces. She dreamed of a man's song beneath the stars, and the fire it lit within her chest. Chapter 2, The Singer and the Queen. From Badero's point of view. The palace of Ilujin was a cage. Badero knew it from the day he was dragged in, his wrists bound with rope, his voice beaten into silence, his freedom traded for endless toil. Once, he had been a man of his own people, known for his singing, his laughter, his strength. Now, he was a slave of Oba Aramoro, expected to bow low, to eat little, to speak only when spoken to. But the cage could not kill the spirit within him. He carried songs in his heart like hidden fire, and sometimes, when the moon hung fat and the guards grew careless, he let his voice slip free. It was during one such evening of song that he first felt it, the sensation of being watched. He had been pounding yam in the courtyard, sweat dripping down his bare back, his voice carrying a tune from his village. The pestle rose and fell in rhythm with the song, a rhythm his body knew by heart. But something made him pause mid-beat. The hairs on his neck stood. He lifted his head, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a shadow at the high window above. The queen's window. He dropped his gaze quickly, his heart tightening. Fool, to even think of such a thing was death. Yet when he resumed pounding, his voice trembled, not with fear, but with the strange awareness that someone had heard him. Someone who was not a slave. The next day, a maid came to him, her eyes quick and secretive. The young queen, Faderera, summons you to her chambers, she said. His stomach dropped. A queen, summoning him, nothing good could come of this. But he was a slave. Slaves did not refuse. He entered her chambers barefoot, his simple tunic damp with the sweat of the morning's labor. The room was heavy with the scent of scented oils, the walls draped with silks finer than anything he had ever touched. At the far end, on a cushioned seat, sat the queen. She was younger than he expected. Younger, and more beautiful than any words could hold. Her skin glowed like polished bronze, her lips full, her eyes dark and sharp as midnight. She wore a wrapper of soft indigo that clung to her curves, beads circling her slender wrists. He lowered himself immediately to his knees. My queen, raise your head, she said softly. The command shook him. He hesitated before obeying. And when their eyes met, something inside him faltered. He had looked upon women before. Back in his village, maidens had sighed at his songs, but never had he seen eyes like hers. Eyes that were restless, hungry, lonely. You are Badero, she said, her voice low. Yes, my queen, they say you sing. I would hear it, my queen, the king. Her gaze sharpened. I command it. Paa. His throat went dry. To refuse was dangerous. To sing was worse. Yet what choice did he have? So he sang. His voice trembled at first, but then it steadied, filling the chamber with a tune of rivers and wind, of homes left behind, of a freedom he once knew. When the song ended, silence wrapped the room. He dared not look at her, but he felt her eyes on him, heavy, burning. You may go, she whispered at last. He rose and left quickly, his heart pounding like a drum of war. That night, lying on his mat in the slave quarters, Badero stared at the thatched ceiling, unable to sleep. Why had she summoned him? Why had her eyes lingered so? And why had he felt that spark inside his chest when their gazes met? He clenched his fists. She was a queen, he was a slave. To desire her was to invite death. And yet, when he closed his eyes, he saw her face again, framed by silks, her lips parted as though she wanted more than just his song. He cursed softly and turned on his side, but the truth would not be silenced. He was already hers, though he knew he could never have her. Chapter 3, The Queen in Water. Badero's point of view. The palace of Ilujin was alive with whispers. Badero heard them in the courtyards, in the kitchens, among the guards. They spoke of the king's failing health, of the endless prayers for his longevity, of the youngest queen whose beauty was too radiant for a man so near the grave. Badero kept his head low, his eyes on the ground, his hands busy with labor. It was the only way to survive. But no matter how much he tried to bury himself in silence, her presence pressed against him like heat. Faderera, she had summoned him twice more since the evening of song. Each time, her questions were harmless. Where are you from, Badero? What do your people eat? What do they sing at harvest? But her eyes told another story. They lingered too long. They searched him, bold and unashamed. He began to fear the sound of her maid's footsteps. Yet he longed for them, too. And that frightened him more than any whip ever could. On the 7th day after his song, she summoned him again. But this time, it was to her bathing chambers. Badero froze when the maid delivered the message. The queen asks for you. Now. His first thought was that he must have erred, that she would accuse him of some wrong. Still, he went, barefoot and trembling, because refusal was not an option. When he entered the chamber, the sound of water reached him first, a gentle splash, a soft ripple. The air was thick with the fragrance of rose oil and sandalwood. Steam curled in the lantern light. Then he saw her. Faderera stood waist-deep in the carved stone bath, water lapping at her smooth skin. Her hair was loosened, flowing down her shoulders. Droplets clung to her like jewels, rolling down the curve of her breasts, over the flat of her belly. She turned at his arrival, and for a moment, Badero forgot to breathe. Do not leave, she said, her voice calm, commanding. My queen, he stammered, his eyes darting to the floor. It is not proper. If the king sleeps, she cut in, her tone soft but edged. He does not summon me. He does not look at me. He does not know what it is to see. Her words pierced him, but he clenched his fists and kept his gaze low. You will stand there, she continued, rising slowly from the bath. Water cascaded down her body, dripping from her breasts, her thighs, her hair. She reached for a cloth, but instead of covering herself fully, she draped it loosely, like a veil that revealed more than it hid. Badero's chest ached. He fought to keep his eyes averted, but the sight of her seared itself into him. She stepped closer, barefoot on the damp stone, until she was near enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin through the steam. Badero, she whispered, his name trembling on her lips like a secret. Her hand lifted, brushing against his arm, light, deliberate. His body flinched at the touch, not from disgust but from terror of how much he wanted more. My queen, his voice was hoarse, raw. Please, you must not. I am nothing. I am a slave. If they see me here, if the king knows. Her fingers traced the corded muscle of his arm. You are not nothing. Badero's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted, God's help him, he wanted to take her face in his hands and taste her lips, to press her wet body against his. Every part of him screamed for it. But he stepped back instead, his fists trembling. No, he said, though the word burned like fire on his tongue. You must not do this. I cannot. Her eyes darkened, wounded yet hungry. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the dripping of water. Then she turned away, slowly, as if giving him the mercy of retreat. Go then, she whispered. He did. He left quickly, almost stumbling out into the corridor, his breath ragged, his body aflame. But even as he fled, he knew the truth. He had resisted today, but tomorrow, or the next, how much longer could he? Chapter 4, The Whip and the Mercy. Badero's point of view. The next morning, Badero woke to the sting of dread in his chest. He had dreamed of her again, Faderera rising from the bath, her skin dripping with water, her eyes commanding him not to leave. He had woken sweating, ashamed, but the ache in his body reminded him of the truth. No chains, no whip could hold back what his blood longed for. And yet, he had resisted. He had done the right thing. He had fled, so why did unease gnaw at him still? By midday, his fear was answered. 2 guards found him in the courtyard, where he was splitting firewood. Their shadows fell over him, and before he could rise, rough hands seized him by the arms. The queen has lodged complaint, one guard said, his voice flat. Badero's stomach dropped. Complaint. I have done nothing. They did not answer. They dragged him across the courtyard, through the long corridor, until they reached the punishment square behind the king's council hall. There, a small crowd had gathered, slaves, guards, curious maidservants. And above them, seated on a raised veranda, was Faderera. The youngest queen. Her gaze was cold, unreadable, her chin high. She wore a robe of deep crimson, the color of hibiscus petals, her hair adorned with gold pins. No softness, no trembling, no trace of the woman who had whispered his name in steam and candlelight. Lay him down, she commanded. Badero's blood turned to ice. His heart hammered as the guards forced him to his knees and bound his wrists to the whipping post. My queen, he cried, his voice hoarse, desperate. I beg you, I have not wronged you. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, a flash of something. Pain, anger, desire, he could not tell. Then her voice rang out, cool and clear. This slave dared insolence before me. He refused my summons properly. In the king's palace, no slave chooses when to obey or whom not to obey. Let the whip teach him a lesson he will never forget. The crowd murmured. The guards tightened his bindings. Then came the whistle of leather. The first lash struck his back with searing fire. Badero bit down hard, refusing to cry out. Another came, and another, each one burning through his flesh, rattling his bones. By the 5th stroke, his breath came ragged. By the 7th, blood trickled down his spine. The pain was blinding, but worse than the lash was the sight of her, watching. Unflinching, a queen in command, yet in her eyes, only he could see it, the tremor, the guilt she fought to bury. At last, she lifted her hand. Enough. The guards withdrew. Badero sagged against the post, his back a map of blood and welts. His chest heaved, his pride scorched, but his spirit unbroken. He would not weep before her. He would not give her that. She rose from her seat, her robe flowing, and without another word, she turned and left. That night, long after the palace slept, Badero lay on his mat in the slave quarters, biting back groans as every movement tore at his wounds. He thought he would die of the pain, or at least wish for it. Then he heard it, soft footsteps. The scent of sandalwood, a shadow slipping into the room. Badero, whispered a voice he knew too well. He turned his head weakly. There she was, Faderera, cloaked in darkness, carrying a small lamp and a bowl of ointment. My queen, he rasped, bitterness in his tone. Come to see the fruit of your command. Her face softened with sorrow. She set the lamp down and knelt beside him. Hush, speak not so. I had no choice. They were watching. They must not suspect. Her hands, those same hands that had traced his arm in steam, now dipped into the bowl of ointment. She touched his back gently, tenderly, spreading the cool balm across his torn flesh. Badero hissed in pain, but her touch lingered like mercy. I could not bear it, she whispered, her eyes glistening. Each stroke cut me as well. Forgive me, Badero. His body trembled beneath her touch, torn between rage and longing. You are cruel, my queen. You wound me, then soothe me. You call for the whip, then kneel before me. What do you want from me? Her hands stilled. Her voice was low, breaking. You, only you. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. His blood roared in his ears, his heart torn between fury and desire. She leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek. He wanted to push her away. He wanted to claim her mouth with his. Both urges raged within him like fire and storm. Instead, he closed his eyes and whispered, "Leave me, before I lose what little strength I have left." Her lips hovered near his, aching, desperate. Then, slowly, she drew back. I will not stop, Badero, she vowed, her voice trembling. No matter how you resist, you will be mine. And I will be yours. With that, she rose and slipped back into the shadows, leaving him torn and burning in the dark. Chapter 5, The Queen's Bold Hunt. From Faderera's point of view. The days after Badero's punishment gnawed at Faderera like a restless beast inside her chest. She saw him only from a distance, at the stables, carrying water jars, singing low to himself as he worked. His back was still raw with wounds, though she had tended them in secret. She longed to soothe him again, to whisper apologies against his skin. But what tormented her most was his strength. He had resisted her, even when she had stripped him with her eyes, even when she had risked her place, her very life, by stepping into the slave quarters to touch him, he had turned away. He had chosen pain rather than pleasure. The audacity, the cruelty, the allure, every refusal sharpened her hunger. Every glance he stole when he thought she was not watching only deepened her certainty, he wanted her too. He burned as she did, though he tried to bury the flames. And so, she resolved, if he would not come to her willingly, she would break every wall of his resistance. One evening, when the sun cast long golden fingers across the palace courtyards, Faderera summoned him directly. Send me Badero, she told her maid, her tone brooking no delay. He entered her chamber not long after, head bowed, shoulders squared. The bandages beneath his tunic peeked faintly through. His body bore her mark, yet his face remained proud, unreadable. My queen, he murmured, bowing low. Her pulse quickened at the sound of his voice. She had dreamed of it, husky and trembling beneath her lips. She forced her voice steady. I am weary, Badero. Play me a song as you did in your village. I hear whispers that your voice once stilled storms. His eyes flicked up, startled. He hesitated, then nodded. Slowly, he began to hum, then sing, a deep, velvet sound that poured into the chamber like warm honey. It was a song of longing, of rivers running dry, of a heart chained but still beating strong. Every note pierced her heart. It was not just music, it was confession. When he finished, silence wrapped the room. Faderera rose from her couch, her silken robe trailing across the marble floor. She moved toward him, closer, closer, until she stood only a breath away. That voice, she whispered, her eyes locked to his. Do you know what it does to me? He stiffened. My queen. Before he could retreat, she lifted her hand and brushed her fingers against his jaw. His skin was rough with stubble, warm beneath her touch. He closed his eyes briefly, as though fighting some inner storm, then stepped back. You should not, he said hoarsely. This is danger for us both. Her lips curved. Then let us both be damned. The next night, she was bolder still. She summoned him not to her chambers, but to the queen's private bath again for the second time, a place forbidden to any man but her husband. The room was lit with dozens of oil lamps, their flames dancing across the waters, casting golden shadows on the walls. When he entered, carrying fresh towels as commanded, he froze. She was in the bath, her hair unpinned and flowing, her body half submerged in the scented water. The steam curled around her like a lover's caress. She made no effort to cover herself. Come closer, she said softly. He kept his eyes low, his fists clenched at his sides. My queen, please, do not do this. Do what? She rose slowly from the water, droplets sliding over her bare skin, tracing her curves like beads of glass. She stepped out, unashamed, her body gleaming beneath the lamplight. He turned sharply, his chest heaving. By the gods, Faderera! Look at me, Badero! Her voice was a command, low and steady. Look at the woman who wants you more than air. Reluctantly, his eyes met hers. Desire warred with fear in his gaze, and the sight thrilled her. She moved closer, close enough for the water still dripping from her body to touch his arm. She brushed his skin deliberately, her fingers trailing lightly along the muscles of his forearm. Tell me you do not feel it, she whispered, her lips near his ear. Tell me you do not dream of me at night as I dream of you. He trembled. For a heartbeat, she thought he would break, that he would seize her, press her against the wall, claim her as she ached to be claimed. Instead, he stepped back sharply, his breath ragged. I am not yours to take, he said, his voice raw with struggle. I am a slave. You are a queen. This path leads to ruin. Her heart pounded with fury and fire. She wanted to scream, to strike him, to beg him. Instead, she smiled, slow, dangerous, certain. Then let ruin come. And as he left, shoulders stiff, eyes shadowed with conflict, she whispered to herself. I will have you, Badero. Even if it costs me everything. Chapter 6, The Slave's Breaking Point. From Badero's point of view. The lashes across Badero's back had mostly healed, but the memory of them lingered, sharp as the whip itself. Each mark was a warning burned into his flesh, stay away from the queen. And yet, how could he? She was everywhere. In the courtyard, her laughter floated like music, drawing his gaze no matter how he tried to resist. In the garden, her scent lingered on the flowers he tended, making him dizzy. Even in sleep, she invaded his dreams, her soft hands pulling him down into fevered visions of pleasure he dared not taste. But her summons to the bath, that had nearly destroyed him. He had seen her then as no man should, her body glistening like the goddesses carved into temple walls. The image haunted him, tormenting him. He told himself he resisted, that he turned away, but in truth, he had looked long enough to burn every curve of her into his memory. And she knew. By the gods, she knew. One humid night, Badero was ordered to bring a basket of fruits to her private chamber. He entered silently, keeping his eyes on the floor as he placed the basket on a low table. Stay, came her voice, low and velvet smooth. He froze. Sit there, she said, pointing to a cushioned stool across from her couch. My queen, I must return. Sit. Her tone was sharper now, and his body obeyed before his mind could resist. She reclined against pillows, dressed in a robe of thin silk that clung to her form. The lamplight made the fabric nearly transparent. She plucked a fig from the basket, split it with delicate fingers, and held one half out to him. Eat. He hesitated, but hunger, of more than one kind, moved him. He leaned forward, took the fruit, and tasted it. Sweetness burst on his tongue. Her eyes darkened. Good. She bit into the other half slowly, lips closing over it in a way that made his stomach knot. They sat in silence for a time, broken only by the soft sound of her eating, the rustle of silk. Then she leaned forward, her voice husky. Tell me, Badero, did you think of me after the bath? His breath caught. He clenched his fists, nails digging into his palms. I tried not to, but you did. His silence was answer enough. She rose then, crossing the short space between them. He tried to stand, but she placed a hand on his shoulder and pressed him down. He felt the weight of her authority, the weight of her touch. Her other hand rose to his face, tracing the line of his jaw, the curve of his lips. You are strong, Badero. Stronger than any man I have known. But you cannot fight this forever. Do you feel it? This fire between us. He closed his eyes, trembling. You play with death, my queen. It is not time yet for you to die, she whispered, lowering her face close to his. Her lips hovered a breath from his, her warm breath fanning across his mouth. But give me life first. For a heartbeat, his resolve shattered. His body screamed to seize her, to taste her, to drown in her. His lips almost brushed hers. And then he wrenched away, standing so quickly the stool toppled behind him. No, his voice cracked with the force of his denial. I am no fool. The king's men would cut out my tongue, sever my limbs, burn me alive. You would watch them do it. Her eyes glistened, anger and hurt warring within them. She rose slowly, dignity wrapping around her like armor. You think me so cruel? You think I would feed you to wolves after daring to give me what I crave? He swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. I think you do not understand the chains that bound me. You are bound by gold and silk. I am bound by iron. For me, there is no escape. He turned to leave, his chest heaving with the effort it took to walk away. But as he reached the door, her voice stopped him. You are wrong, Badero. He froze. You are bound only by your fear. One day soon, you will surrender. And when you do, her words lingered, dripping like honey and poison together, it will be sweeter than any fruit you have ever tasted. That night, lying on the straw mat in the slaves' quarters, Badero clenched his fists until his knuckles whitened. He hated her. He wanted her. He feared her. He needed her. The chains of iron she spoke of rattled in his soul. But what terrified him most was that she was right. Sooner or later, he would break. Chapter 7. A Kiss in the Shadows. From Faderera's point of view, the palace of Ilujin was not built for secrets. Its walls had ears, its servants had sharp tongues, and its wives were rivals first, sisters never. Faderera knew this better than anyone. Morinike, the second wife, had already begun to whisper. She had seen the way Faderera's gaze lingered too long on the tall, broad-shouldered slave. She had seen Badero's hands tremble when he poured wine into Faderera's cup, his eyes fixed on the ground to avoid temptation. Morinike's smile grew sharper with every passing day. If the old king suspected, Badero would be whipped until his flesh peeled, perhaps executed. And Faderera herself, well, the fate of a wayward wife was never spoken aloud. But she had heard of poison slipped into wine cups, of women suffocated quietly in their chambers, their deaths mourned with hollow ceremony. Still, her hunger would not die. That night, Faderera sent for Badero under the pretense of needing him to carry baskets of scented wood for her chamber hearth. She timed it carefully, waiting until the other wives were at the king's side for the evening meal. He came silently, his face dark with tension, his hands rough against the smooth woven handles of the basket. Place them by the fire, she ordered softly, dismissing the maids with a glance. When the chamber doors closed, sealing them in, the air seemed to thicken. Badero obeyed, kneeling near the hearth as he arranged the wood. The muscles of his back shifted beneath his tunic, his scars still faintly visible in the lamplight. Faderera's breath caught. She had both inflicted that pain and soothed it, and the sight twisted her heart with guilt and desire. When he rose, she stepped closer. Too close. Her perfume curled between them like a spell. You avoid me more each day, she whispered. Do you hate me now, Badero? He swallowed, keeping his gaze fixed on the floor. No, my queen. Then why will you not look at me? Because if I do, his voice was hoarse, trembling. I will forget myself. Her heart thundered. Slowly, deliberately, she lifted her hand to his chin. His skin was warm beneath her touch, rough with stubble. She tilted his face upward until his dark eyes met hers. And in that moment, the world stilled. The fire crackled, the lamps flickered. Outside, a night bird cried. But all she saw were his eyes, blazing with the storm he tried so hard to cage. You are already forgetting, she whispered. His breath came ragged, his body taut as a bowstring. This will kill us both. Then let it, she murmured. And before reason could rise, she leaned in and pressed her lips to his. It was not gentle, it was fire meeting fire, a desperate claiming. His lips were warm, trembling against hers. For a heartbeat, he resisted, his hands hovering in the air as if unsure whether to push her away or pull her closer. Then something in him broke, and he seized her, crushing her against him. The kiss deepened, hungry, forbidden, a feast they had both starved for. Her hands tangled in his hair, his fingers dug into her waist, pulling her against the hard planes of his chest. But just as the fire threatened to consume them, a sound shattered the spell, footsteps in the corridor, approaching swiftly. They tore apart, breathless, eyes wide with panic. Faderera grabbed the basket of wood, thrust it into his arms. Go, now, she hissed. The door rattled. He slipped out through the side passage just as one of the elder king's guards entered. My queen, the guard said, bowing low. The king grows restless. He asks for your company at the evening meal. Faderera's heart pounded so violently she feared the guard would hear it. She forced a serene smile, smoothing her robes as if nothing were amiss. Tell His Majesty I come at once. The guard bowed again and left. When the door closed, Faderera pressed trembling fingers to her lips. They still burned with the taste of him. She had kissed him, and he had kissed her back. There was no going back now. Chapter 8. Whispers of Fire. From Badero's point of view, the kiss haunted him. No matter how many times he bent over the palace gardens, or how heavily sweat soaked his tunic, he could not drive the memory away. The press of her lips, the sweetness of her breath, the hunger in her eyes, it followed him everywhere. Yet it was the danger that weighed heavier. In Ilujin nothing remained hidden for long. A glance too soft, a smile that lingered too long, a servant summoned one too many times, these were the sparks that lit infernos of gossip. And already, Badero felt the shift. The guards' eyes lingered on him. The elder wives whispered in corners. Once, Morinike had laughed with pointed malice as Faderera excused herself from the king's side. The walls were closing in, and he knew if he slipped even once, the price would be his life. But Faderera was relentless. That night, a maid slipped into the servants' quarters and murmured the words that made his stomach twist with both fear and longing. "The Queen Faderera calls for you." Alone, her chambers smelled of incense and warm oils. The lamps burned low, their golden glow draping the walls in shadows. At first he thought the room empty, until he heard the faint sound of water dripping. Then she stepped into view. She was naked, her skin glistening from the bath, her hair loose around her shoulders. She walked without shame, every step deliberate, every curve of her body illuminated by the flickering lamps. Badero froze, his eyes darting away as heat surged through him. "My queen," he whispered, bowing low, voice taut with desperation. "Why have you called me here?" "To see me," she answered, her voice low, velvet smooth. He swallowed hard, his pulse thundering in his ears. "This is dangerous. If anyone should..." "Shish." She raised a finger, silencing him with nothing but her authority. "Tonight you will speak little. You will only watch." Before he could protest, she reclined against the cushions spread across her low couch. The silk of the sheets clung to her damp skin, slipping lower as she shifted. Her eyes never left his as she trailed her fingers across her own body, slowly, deliberately, drawing circles at her throat, her breasts, her stomach. Badero's breath grew ragged, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He dared not move, dared not even swallow too loudly, but the sight of her undid every defense he had built. "You resist me with your lips," she murmured, her voice husky now, "but your eyes, Badero, your eyes betray you." His chest rose and fell with painful restraint. "My queen, please, watch," she commanded, her voice a whip of silk. And so he did, helpless, tormented. The sound of her soft breaths filled the chamber as her movements grew bolder, her body arching, her sighs like music meant only for him. He trembled, sweat slicking his skin, every muscle coiled tight with hunger and shame. When at last she stilled, her body glistening, her chest heaving, she opened her eyes and smiled, slow, satisfied, dangerous. "Now," she whispered, her tone edged with cruel sweetness, "you may leave." The words struck him harder than any whip. Confused, shaken, and burning with need he could not sat, Badero staggered back. He bowed low, but his voice cracked when he forced the words, "Yes, my queen." As he stumbled from the chamber, the memory of what he had seen seared itself into him like fire. He could no longer deny it, the battle he had waged against her was crumbling. Chapter 9, The Breaking Point. From Faderera's point of view, the power of that night lingered with her. She had seen it in his trembling hands, in the way his chest rose and fell as though each breath were a war, in the burning heat of his eyes though he dared not touch her. She had left him with nothing but longing, a fire smoldering inside him, and she knew he would not be able to carry it forever. But she was restless. She wanted more than his tormented gaze. She wanted the taste of his surrender, the sound of his voice when restraint gave way to need. So she plotted. For days she denied herself the sight of him, though it gnawed at her heart. She let him toil in the gardens and at the wells, his broad shoulders gleaming with sweat beneath the sun, his voice humming the soft, mournful songs of his lost homeland. She watched him only from afar, cloaked by veils and palace screens. Each glimpse deepened her hunger. At last, she sent for him again. But this time, she prepared carefully. Badero entered her chamber stiff-backed, his gaze lowered, the memory of his last torment still raw. His pulse betrayed him, beating too hard, too fast, but he bowed low as always. "You called for me, my queen." "I did." Her voice was silk over steel. "Come closer." He obeyed, though every step looked as though it cost him a piece of his soul. She had dressed not in silks or heavy jewelry tonight, but in a thin wrap of sheer white linen that clung to her curves, barely concealing, meant to inflame. The lamps burned lower than before, their shadows intimate, the scent of jasmine thick in the air. She moved toward him slowly, deliberately, her bare feet whispering over the rugs. When she reached him, she raised a hand and brushed her fingertips against his arm. He stiffened, his breath catching, but he did not move away. "You are angry with me," she whispered, tilting her face up toward his. I am lost, my queen, he admitted, his voice rough. You ask me to stand at the edge of a fire. And I am only a slave. One misstep and I am ash. Faderera's lips curved into a soft, dangerous smile. And yet, still you come when I summon you. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched, he looked as though he might turn, flee, end it all, but then her hand slid down his arm, slow as honey, until her fingers laced with his. His breath shuddered out of him, his chest heaving. No, he whispered hoarsely, though his hand did not pull away. I cannot. Yes, she murmured, pressing closer, her body grazing his. You already have. And then she kissed him. Unlike the stolen, desperate press of lips in the garden, this kiss was long, deep, unhurried. Acclaiming, she felt his resistance falter, crumble, and finally shatter as his arms lifted, hesitated, then closed around her with all the force of a dam breaking. The hunger he had buried, the fire he had denied, it surged out of him in a wave. His mouth moved against hers with raw desperation, his hands trembling as though afraid and yet unable to stop themselves from exploring the silk of her back, the curve of her waist. When at last she drew back, her lips swollen, her breath ragged, she saw it in his eyes. The man who had resisted her for so long was gone. Badero had surrendered. That night, he did not stay. Fear still gnawed at him, and before their fire could consume them completely, he pulled away, bowing low with eyes filled with torment. But as he slipped into the night, Faderera knew the truth. The wall had cracked. The next time, it would crumble. And when it did, there would be no turning back. Chapter 10, The Night of No Return. From Badero's point of view. He had tried. By the gods, he had tried. For moons he had carried her fire in his heart, choking it down with every song he sang at the well, every swing of his hoe in the king's gardens. He prayed for deliverance. He begged his heart to harden, begged his body to resist. But the memory of her lips haunted him like a spirit. The taste of her breath, the softness of her hand in his, he could not banish it. When she summoned him again, he almost did not go. Almost. But slaves had no. And so he found himself once more outside her chamber door, the heavy scent of incense curling into his nostrils, his body already betraying him with heat. Enter, came her voice, low and thick with command. He pushed the doors open, and the world shifted. She was not dressed as a queen tonight. No heavy gold, no jeweled headpieces, no silks embroidered with the king's crest. Faderera stood barefoot, wrapped in nothing but a soft, pale cloth that fell loose over one shoulder, leaving the other bare. Her hair was unbound, tumbling in a dark river down her back. The lamplight made her skin glow like burnished bronze. Badero, she said, her voice soft as the first rains. He bowed low, refusing to lift his gaze. My queen. No, she cut in, sharp but trembling. Not, my queen, say my name. He froze. The very air in the chamber seemed to still. My lady, I cannot. You will, she whispered, stepping closer, her fingers brushing against his chin, urging him to lift his face. If you are ever to touch me truly, then you must call me as I am. Faderera. His lips parted, but no sound came. His heart thundered in his chest like war drums. This was beyond forbidden. To speak her name without title was death. Yet as her eyes bored into his, wet with longing, he felt the last of his defenses crumble. Faderera, he breathed. Her sigh was a shiver, a surrender, a plea. She pressed her forehead against his, her breath mingling with his own. You see, she murmured, not so impossible. When their lips met again, there was no hesitation left in either of them. Badero kissed her as a man starved, his hands trembling as they slid to her waist, her back, her hair. She clung to him as though he were the only thing anchoring her to the earth. Her cloth loosened under his touch, sliding down to the floor. She stood before him bare, unashamed, her body trembling but her gaze steady. And in that moment, he understood. The realization struck him like lightning, Faderera had never been touched. Not by the old king, not by any man. She was untouched, pure, a virgin despite her title as queen and wife. His chest tightened with anguish and wonder. By the gods, he whispered, his voice breaking. You are. Yes, she said quickly, her hands framing his face, as if she feared he might recoil. He was too weak, too sickly. They gave me to him as a prize, a token. He never touched me, Badero. I have waited for someone who could see me, who could make me feel alive. Tears stung his eyes, though he fought them back. This woman, given as a bargain, dressed as a jewel, left lonely in golden cages. And now she had chosen him, the slave, the singer, the man she should never have looked at twice. Faderera, he whispered again, reverent, as though her name were a prayer. She pressed her lips to his ear, trembling with need. Take me, not as a queen, not as a wife but as your woman. That night, they crossed the line they could never return from. Her first gasp against his lips, the way her body arched to meet his, the trembling surrender of her hands gripping his shoulders, each moment burned itself into his soul. He was tender, careful, yet overcome with a hunger that matched hers. When she cried out, it was not with pain alone, but with the release of years of longing. And Badero, for the first time since his capture, felt not like a slave, but like a man, a lover, alive and whole in her arms. By the time dawn painted the sky faint gold, Faderera lay curled against him, her body soft and spent, her face buried in his chest. His fingers traced the lines of her back, his heart torn between bliss and dread. He knew now, there was no going back. They were bound, by sin, by passion, by a love that could get them both killed. And yet, as her lips whispered his name in sleep, he swore to himself. He would die before letting her go. Chapter 11, The River of Secrets. From Faderera's point of view. Since that night, the world had changed. Every glance from Badero was a spark, every brush of his hand when he served at table a silent fire. Yet they both knew they must walk carefully. The palace walls were made of eyes and tongues, and Morinike's whispers had already grown sharper. So they played their roles. By day, Faderera remained the dutiful wife, her face serene, her hands folded in her lap as the old king coughed and dozed beside her. Badero bent his back to the gardens, to the well, to the burdens of servitude. But at night, desire gnawed at them both. It was Faderera who devised the meeting. At the river, she had whispered to him while passing through the courtyard, her voice a breath that no one else could hear. When the moon is high, the river lay beyond the palace walls, fed by springs that glistened silver beneath the moonlight. Its banks were lined with tall reeds, swaying and whispering like conspirators. Badero was there first, his broad frame crouched low in the shadows, the songs of his homeland humming faintly from his lips to calm his nerves. When he saw her approach, wrapped in a cloak of indigo that hid her face, his heart leapt painfully in his chest. "My queen," he began, but she silenced him with a look. "Say it," she murmured, stepping closer, her eyes glowing in the moonlight. "Faderera," he breathed, her name trembling in his mouth like a secret prayer. Her cloak slipped from her shoulders, revealing the flowing shift beneath, thin as mist. The moon painted her skin with silver, and for a moment he simply stared, struck dumb by the sight of her, this woman who risked everything for him. "You came," she whispered. "I would cross the gods, own flames to come to you," he said, his voice thick with both devotion and fear. They fell into each other's arms by the riverbank, the reeds hiding them from the world. His lips found hers with desperate hunger, hers answered with trembling need. Every touch was frantic, stolen, as though the very stars above might betray them. Her hands roamed his back, feeling the hardened muscle beneath, the faint scars where whips had kissed his skin. His hands worshipped her body reverently, tracing every curve as though she were carved of divine stone. When at last he entered her, the river sang around them, its waters rippling like a hymn. She gasped his name, not as queen to slave, but as woman to man, and he silenced her with kisses, swallowing every sound of her surrender. The world melted away. There was no king, no palace, no whispers in the dark. Only the rush of water, the press of their bodies, and the knowledge that this love, forbidden though it was, burned brighter than anything else in their lives. When it was over, they lay tangled together on the grass, the moon above them a silent witness. Her head rested on his chest, his arm wrapped tight around her as though he would never let her go. "Badero," she whispered, "do you think the gods will punish us?" He pressed his lips to her hair. "If they do, then let them. For even a single night like this is worth 1,000 deaths." But as the first light of dawn began to pale the sky, they knew they must part. She drew her cloak back over her shoulders, he smoothed the reeds to hide their tryst, and with one last, lingering kiss, they returned separately to the palace, their love hidden once more. Yet even as she walked back through the gates, Faderera smiled to herself. The river had become theirs. Their sanctuary, their altar, their secret, and she knew, they would return again. Chapter 12, Shadows on the Riverbank. From Badero's point of view, the river had become their sanctuary. Every moonlit meeting with Faderera burned into Badero's soul like a sacred song. Yet the deeper their love grew, the heavier the weight of fear pressed against his chest. He was a slave, property of the old king. She was the youngest queen of Ilujin. If they were found together, not even the gods could save them. Still, he went. Always, he went. That night, he waited beneath the reeds, heart pounding, the scent of water lilies thick in the air. The sound of soft footsteps made him look up, and there she was, cloaked in midnight blue, eyes darting nervously before she slipped into his arms. Faderera, he whispered, brushing his lips over her brow. She tilted her chin defiantly. I would rather die here with you than live another day untouched in that palace. Her words undid him. With a groan, he pulled her close, their mouths meeting, their hands wandering like starving seekers. Clothes loosened, the cool grass pressed beneath them, and soon they were lost in the fevered rhythm of one another's bodies. But then, a sharp crack echoed in the distance. A snapped twig. Badero froze. His warrior's instinct screamed danger. He clamped his hand over Faderera's mouth, silencing her soft gasp. Through the reeds, he saw the flicker of a torch. Voices. Male. Guards. Over here, one said. The queen's maid swore she saw someone slip this way. Badero's blood turned to ice. He pulled Faderera down with him into the reeds, pressing her against the damp earth. His body shielded hers, his heart hammering so loud he feared it would give them away. The torchlight swept closer, illuminating the riverbank not 10 paces from where they lay. The guards' sandals crunched over gravel, their muttering low but clear. Perhaps it was nothing, one grumbled. Or perhaps the queen keeps secrets, the other replied darkly. Faderera's nails dug into Badero's arm. He could feel her trembling beneath him, her breath ragged against his chest. For a moment, he thought it was over. That they would be dragged back in chains, their love laid bare for all of Ilujin to spit upon. But then, the guards turned back, cursing under their breath. The torchlight faded, their footsteps disappeared into the distance. Silence. Badero exhaled shakily, lifting his head. Faderera's eyes, wide and wet with fear, searched his face. And then, before he could stop himself, he kissed her, roughly, fiercely, as though to claim her against the world. When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "We cannot keep meeting here. It is too dangerous." He cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing the corner of her lips. "And yet I would meet you still, even if the gallows awaited me." Her gaze softened, though fear lingered in it. "Then we must be clever. No more careless nights. No more risks, unless we plan them well." They parted before dawn, their steps careful, their hearts still pounding. But one thing was clear to both of them now. Their love was no longer just forbidden. It was hunted. Chapter 13, Whispers in the Courtyard. From Faderera's point of view, the palace was no longer safe. Faderera felt it in the way eyes followed her, in the sudden hush that fell when she entered a chamber, in the sly curl of Morinike's lips whenever their paths crossed. The second wife had always been a serpent, sharp-tongued and cruel, but now her suspicion had teeth. "You look brighter these days," Morinike said one morning as they stood together in the courtyard, watching the old king's attendants carry him toward the healing hut. Her voice was sweet as honey, but her eyes were sharp as a blade. "Strange, isn't it? A young wife glowing while her husband lies half dead." Faderera's heart skipped. She schooled her features into calmness, smiling faintly. "I pray to the gods for his health each night. Perhaps they bless me with their light." Morinike leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Or perhaps the gods are not the ones warming your bed." The words pierced like daggers. Faderera forced herself not to flinch, not to glance toward the garden where Badero worked among the shrubs. She left quickly, her steps measured, though inside her chest her heart thundered like war drums. That night, when the palace had grown still and only the sound of the old king's labored snores filled the chambers, Faderera slipped into the shadows of the servant quarters. She found Badero waiting, his eyes scanning every corner like a hunted animal. "We were almost discovered," she breathed, clutching his arm. "The guards searched the riverbank last night. And now Morinike, she suspects something. I can see it in her eyes." Badero's jaw tightened, the moonlight catching the hard lines of his face. "I warned you. Every time we meet, the danger grows. She will not rest until she has proof. And proof means death, for us both." Her fingers traced the scars on his arm, desperate, pleading. "Then let us be more careful. I cannot live without you, Badero. The king gives me nothing but silence and decay. You are my only breath of life." He turned from her, fists clenched, battling the torment inside him. He should have walked away. He should have torn himself from her grasp, left her to the gilded prison of her queenship. But when she whispered, "Say my name," his resolve shattered. "Faderera," he groaned, the sound breaking from his chest. Her lips found his in the dark, soft yet fierce, and all the fear, the danger, the risk of death itself melted away. They clung to each other desperately, bodies pressed together in the hidden alcove of the courtyard, their kisses muffled by the rustling leaves. For a heartbeat, the world disappeared. But just as his hand slid around her waist, a sound split the silence. A low hiss. They both froze. Turning their heads, they saw a shadow slipping away into the corridor. Someone had seen them. Faderera's blood turned cold. Badero's hand gripped hers tightly, his jaw set. "Who was it?" she whispered. He shook his head, grim. "It matters not. Whoever it was will not keep silent." Their love, once hidden by reeds and moonlight, now trembled on the edge of exposure. Chapter 14, Masks of Hatred. From Badero's point of view. The palace had always been a cage, but now it was a cage with sharpened bars. Since that night, Badero had felt the shift in the air, the sideways glances, the whispers that cut off when he entered a room, the sudden cruelty in the overseer's commands. Someone had seen them, and he feared it was only a matter of time before the truth reached the king's ears. But worse than all this was Morinike. She prowled the palace like a jackal, her eyes forever hunting. One morning, as Badero hauled jars of water into the courtyard, she stepped into his path. Her lips curved in a smile that did not touch her eyes. "You work hard for a man of no worth," she said, circling him slowly. "Tell me, slave, do you ever dream of more than this? Of silk instead of rags? Of a woman's arms instead of the whip?" Her words were a knife pressed to his throat. Badero kept his head bowed, jaw clenched. "I dream only of serving this household, my lady." She tilted her head, studying him with the sharpness of a hawk. "Perhaps. Or perhaps you serve a mistress in ways you should not." Her voice dripped venom, and then, as swiftly as she had come, she swept away, her laughter echoing off the stone walls. That night, Faderera slipped into the shadows of the herb garden where they often met. But before she could speak, Badero caught her wrist, his grip hard. "No," he said harshly. "Stay away from me." Her eyes widened, hurt flashing in them like lightning. "Badero, what? You are a queen," he snapped, forcing the words through clenched teeth, though his heart bled with each one. "And I am nothing but a slave. If you keep chasing this folly, you will bring ruin on us both. I want no part of your games." She recoiled as if struck, her lips trembling. "You don't mean that." "I do," he lied, the taste of the words like ash in his mouth. "I despise you, Faderera. Leave me alone." Her eyes filled with tears, but before she could answer, footsteps sounded nearby, servants, passing close. Quickly, Badero shoved her back, his face twisted into a mask of scorn. "Go back to your chambers, my queen," he spat bitterly. "Before the king learns how restless you are." She stumbled away, her cloak sweeping after her like a wounded bird. Only when the night swallowed her did Badero sink to his knees, his fists pressed to the earth. The lie had cut deeper than any whip. But he knew it was the only way. If he had to break her heart to keep her safe, then he would. But in the shadows of the palace wall, unseen by both of them, Morinike smiled. She had heard every word. And she was not fooled. Chapter 15, The Serpent's Snare. From Faderera's point of view. Faderera had not slept in days. Badero's cruel words, his cold rejection, echoed in her ears every waking moment. "I despise you, Faderera." No blade could have cut deeper. Yet, despite the pain, she did not believe it. She had seen the truth in his eyes, the way his hands shook when he pushed her away. He lied to protect her. She knew it with every beat of her heart. But Morinike knew something too. The second wife's smile grew sharper each day. She whispered to servants when Faderera passed. She lingered by the king's side with nasty words. And always, her eyes followed Badero like a predator stalking prey. Faderera felt the net closing in. One evening, a maid brought a message to her chambers. "My queen," the girl said, bowing low, "the slave Badero requests your presence in the herb garden. He waits for you now." Faderera's heart leapt. She should have been cautious, should have questioned why he would dare summon her so boldly. But longing overpowered reason. She wrapped herself in a cloak and hurried into the night. The garden lay quiet, moonlight spilling over the neat rows of herbs and blossoms. She stepped between the beds of basil and mint, her eyes searching. "Badero," she whispered. A shadow moved. She rushed forward, and froze. It was not Badero. It was Morinike. The older wife stood among the gardens, her silk robes trailing like a serpent's skin, her smile gleaming in the pale light. Behind her, two palace guards lurked, their hands on their spears. "So eager, little dove," Morinike purred. Did you think your lover waited here for you? Faderera's breath caught. Her blood turned cold. From the corner of her eye, movement stirred. Badero. He was there, half hidden behind the tall stalks of lemongrass. His face was tight, his body poised like a spring about to snap. She knew at once, he had not sent for her. He had been deceived just as she had been deceived too. Their eyes locked across the garden. 1,000 words passed in that glance. But then Morinike's voice sliced the night. Guards, seize her. The men moved forward. Panic surged in Faderera's chest. She opened her mouth to cry out, but before a sound escaped, Badero stepped into the open. Wait, his voice rang out, steady as steel. Morinike's smile widened. Ah, the slave himself. The guards hesitated, awaiting her command. She tilted her head, savoring the moment. So it is true, the queen and the servant. What a scandal for our kingdom. Faderera's heart hammered. This was the end, unless... Badero's hand brushed against a spade left in the soil. His eyes flicked to hers, then back to Morinike. She knew what he meant. He was ready to fight. But if he did, blood would stain the garden, and their love would be doomed forever. Please, Morinike, Faderera said, her voice trembling. She stepped forward, hands outstretched, as if in surrender. Do not shame me, I beg of you. Morinike's smile grew cruel. Oh, I will not shame you, little dove. The king himself shall witness your disgrace. But before she could speak further, a sudden sound tore through the air, a crash of clay jars from the servants' quarters, followed by frantic shouting. The guards spun, startled. Badero seized the moment. He darted forward, grasped Faderera's hand, and pulled her into the shadows of the garden. They fled like hunted deer, the reeds and walls shielding their escape. Behind them, Morinike's furious cry echoed through the night. When they finally stopped, breathless in a dark storeroom, Faderera collapsed against him, her chest heaving. She will not stop, Badero rasped, his hands clutching her shoulders. She will hunt us until we are destroyed. Faderera pressed her forehead to his, tears spilling. Then let us leave, Badero. Let us go far from Ilujin. Before it is too late. For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by their ragged breaths. And then, slowly, he nodded. Yes, he said hoarsely. We must flee. Chapter 16, Poison in the King's Ear. From Morinike's point of view, the old king of Ilujin lay propped on cushions, his breath wheezing like a broken bellows, his eyes clouded with age and sickness. Around him, the chamber smelled of incense and bitter herbs, but Morinike brought her own perfume, the sharp sweetness of scheming. She had waited long enough. The serpent had cornered its prey. My lord, she said softly, kneeling by his side, her silken robes whispering across the stone floor. She poured cool water into a cup and held it to his cracked lips. How weak you have grown. Yet the kingdom depends on you. You must be strong. The king drank, water trickling down his chin. His voice was hoarse. Strong. My bones betray me. My sons grow restless. And you bring only riddles. Morinike's smile was gentle, her eyes downcast. I bring no riddles, my husband. Only the truth. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspirator's whisper. Your youngest wife, Faderera, betrays you. The king's eyes flickered, a spark of life piercing the fog of age. Betrays me? How? She dishonors your bed, Morinike said smoothly, savoring each word. With a slave, Badero, a common dog from the war raids. The king coughed violently, his hands shaking as he gripped his blanket. A slave, my wife. I would not believe it, were it not for what I have seen with my own eyes, Morinike pressed on. She meets him in the gardens by the rivers, even in her royal chambers, in the dark of night. She whispers his name as though it were a prayer. She burns for him, not for you. Even now, your palace whispers of it. The king's face twisted, rage breaking through his frailty. The gods strike me down, a slave. Morinike placed a hand on his arm, her touch deceptively tender. You must act before your shame is made public, my king. Think of Ilujin's honor. Think of your legacy. If the people learn their queen has lain with a slave, they will laugh at your crown. The king's breath rattled as he glared at her. What would you have me do? Morinike's lips curved like a blade. Summon them both. Question them before the council. If guilt is found, let the slave be whipped to death, and the girl sent back to her father in disgrace. Let the people see that no one, not even your wives, can defy you. She leaned closer, her eyes glinting. Do this, my king, and they will remember your strength even in your last days. The king sank back against his cushions, exhausted, but the seed of poison had been planted. His fingers twitched on the armrest, his jaw tight with humiliated fury. Yes, he rasped at last. Bring them to me. Morinike bowed her head, hiding her triumphant smile. The trap had been reset. This time, she was certain, neither the queen nor her slave would escape. Chapter 17, In the Shadow of Ilujin. From Faderera's point of view. The palace was behind them, yet freedom still felt like a dream. Faderera sat in a narrow, stifling room above a weaver's workshop. The poor old woman had been kind enough to let them hide because of the good she had done for her in time past, her cloak pulled tight around her shoulders. Through the wooden shutters she could hear the noise of Ilujin's marketplace, the clatter of traders, the cries of children, the bark of dogs, but to her it all sounded distant, muffled by fear. They had fled under the veil of darkness, slipping past the servants' gate with nothing but a sack of food and water. Every step through the silent palace halls had been torture, each creak of the floorboards a death knell. But by the mercy of the gods, they had made it through. Now they were here, hidden among the common people, waiting for the cloak of night to fall again. Badero paced the small room, his broad shoulders brushing the low beams. His face was grim, eyes sharp as he scanned the alley below through a slit in the shutters. They will be searching by now, he muttered. Morinike will not rest until she has the king's guards at every gate. We must leave before moonrise. Faderera watched him, her chest tightening with a mixture of fear and awe. This man, once a slave, chained by her husband's wool, now carried himself like a warrior again. Yet beneath his strength, she saw the weight of the risk he bore for her. What if they catch us before we reach the gates? She asked softly. Then we fight, he said simply, turning to her. His gaze softened as he stepped closer, cupping her face with calloused hands. But I will not let them take you. Even if I must fall to keep you free. Her throat tightened. She leaned into his touch, tears burning her eyes. Badero, I left everything for you. My chamber, my jewels, even my crown. All I want now is you. If we die tonight, I will not regret it. No, his voice was fierce, low. We will not die, we will live, Faderera. Do you hear me? We will live. The hours crept by with agonizing slowness. Each sound from the street below, a cart creaking, a shout, the distant tramp of soldiers' boots, made her heart leap into her throat. At last, dusk began to fall. The marketplace grew quieter, its bustle replaced by the soft hum of evening. Badero gathered the small bundle of food and water, slinging it over his back. It is time, he said. Faderera rose, her legs trembling but her spirit steady. She slipped her hand into his, and together they moved toward the stairwell that would take them down into the alley. The road to freedom lay ahead. But so did danger, for though they had left the palace walls, Ilujin still held its chains, and the eyes of the king's men were everywhere. By nightfall, their fate would be decided. Chapter 18, The Road Beyond the Gates. From Badero's point of view. The night was thick, moonlight slipping through clouds like a thief. Ilujin, usually alive with drums and laughter, now lay in uneasy silence. Badero moved like a shadow through the narrow alleys, his hand clasping Faderera's firmly. She stumbled once on a loose stone, but he steadied her without a word. He could feel the tremor in her grip, though her face was set with quiet determination. She had given up her crown, her silks, her guarded chambers, for him. He would die before he let her be dragged back. They kept close to the walls, slipping past darkened stalls and shuttered homes. In the distance, the glow of torches bobbed, palace guards patrolling. Badero's heart tightened. They are searching, Faderera whispered, her breath hot against his ear. Yes, he replied, pulling her into the shadow of an overhanging roof as two guards passed. He could hear their voices clearly. The king grows weaker by the day, one said. But his wrath burns strong. He wants them alive, the slave especially. The second guard spat on the ground. If I find him, I'll cut out his tongue myself. A slave daring to touch a queen. Faderera stiffened beside him, but Badero only pressed a finger to her lips. They waited, hearts pounding, until the guards vanished into the night. The western gate was close now. He could feel it, smell the faint tang of the fields beyond the walls. But the gate itself loomed like a giant's jaw, iron-bound and menacing, flanked by guards who yawned but held their spears ready. There was no way they could simply walk through. Badero's mind raced. He knew the patterns of soldiers, the tricks of movement. He had studied them while toiling in the palace yards, silently waiting for the day the knowledge might free him. That day was tonight. Listen, he whispered, crouching with her in the shadow of a granary. At the changing of the watch, they grow careless. One gate opens for the incoming patrol. That is our moment. Her wide eyes searched his. And if we fail, then we run. And if we cannot run, we fight. The minutes dragged, each heartbeat louder than the last. Faderera clutched his arm, her nails digging into his skin. At last, the sound came, the tramp of boots, the shuffle of men changing guard. The gate groaned open. Now, Badero hissed. They darted forward, blending with the shadows. For a breathless moment, it worked, their figures hidden against the dark. But then, a shout rang out. You there, stop. Torches flared, spears lowered. Badero's hand tightened around Faderera's, and they broke into a desperate sprint. The open road lay before them, freedom just beyond reach. Chapter 19, the threshold snapped. From Badero's point of view, the gate yawned like a promise, wide, iron-toothed, swallowing the shadow of Ilujin and opening onto the country beyond. Dust tracks, a low ridge of palms, the wide road that would carry them to Okona and to the life they had dared to imagine. Freedom was only a few breaths away. He could taste it on the night air, dry and sweet, like crushed millet. Faderera's fingers were small and warm in his palms. Her cloak hung from her shoulders, a dark smudge against the moonlight. They had kept to the edges of forests, to the shade of carts and low market stalls, to the soft dark of the village wall. Twice they had nearly been seen, twice they had slipped like ghosts. Now only the last narrow stretch separated them from the gatehouse where the soldiers changed watch. Ready, he whispered. She nodded. Her face was pale but set. In the half-light she looked like the woman who had slipped a name from him earlier in the quiet of the storeroom, Faderera. They moved as one, shadow to shadow. The open road yawned beyond the gate. For a moment nothing existed but the sound of our feet and the ragged music of our breathing. Then a torch flared, a single bright tongue of light, and a voice barked from the gatehouse. Halt! Boots clattered. Spears shone in the torchlight. Men poured from the gatehouse, a dozen of them, eyes sharp, hands on their weapons. The watch had spotted them. He thought to run, the gate lay a dozen paces ahead. He thought hard, raw and simple, run and keep running until his lungs tore and the horizon swallowed he and Faderera both. But there are things you cannot outrun, numbers, spears, the long reach of the king's order. And then there was the second sound, the voice of recognition. By the gods, someone muttered, closer than I imagined. Is that not? No, he said. He tightened his hold on Faderera, pulled her behind him without thought, instinct taking him before reasoning. Keep your head down. A soldier pushed through the others and raised a lamp. Its glow washed across faces, his, hard and masked, Faderera's, shockingly revealed as the lamp swung past. A gasp cut the night like a blade. The soldier's jaw moved, the next moment his words dropped into the dark like a stone. The queen, he said. His blood went cold. No more running. The world slowed until every footfall was a drumbeat to the end. Faderera's face was gone from fear to a terrible, beautiful defiance. She stepped from behind me without thinking, bare shoulders bared to the moon. I am not, she began. Lady, one guard said, uncertain. She says she is a noble. Another soldier barked, eyes narrowing as he scanned her face. That cloak, the scar on her wrist. Hold, his voice thickened into certainty. By the king's own hand, she is Faderera. Morinike's trap had not needed to place a man at the gate. The palace had mouths everywhere, the sentries had orders, one look at her face, and the things whispered in corridors coalesced into law. The torchlight reflected in the metal of spears. They moved. Bind them, the man in charge ordered. Both of them, bring them to the king immediately. It happened so fast he hardly felt it, only the cruel, stunned winter of the rope as it bit his wrists and the rough hands that hauled Faderera from him. She did not scream, she only looked at him, not with the small, frightened face of the woman he had known in the storeroom, but with the full, tormented agony of a queen who had been stripped of her name and found herself naked before the law. Badero, her whisper reached me like a last prayer through a wall. Do not let them break you. Never, he breathed back. His mouth tasted of dust. He swallowed the rest of his vow down into the hollow of his heart. They dragged them through the gate under the jeering torches. People pressed to the edges of the road, some gaped, some spat, others murmured with a curiosity as cruel as hunger. A child pointed and laughed. A woman crossed herself. He caught a glimpse of the western road just beyond the gate, dark and patient as a thing that had been cheated. The road watched them go. The guards kept them bound with a methodical cruelty. His palms chafed, the rope sank into flesh already knotted with strain. Around them the patrol sang old marching songs meant to empty the courage from a prisoner. A spear's point scraped across his shoulder like a malevolent reminder and urges him on even when his feet will not carry him. When they hauled Faderera, 2 guards held her up. She was not a noble in their eyes anymore but a criminal, a thing to be despised. Morinike had not come to the gate herself. That he had expected. She was cunning enough to let others do the exposing, to keep her hands clean. But word travels on quicker wings than any bird. A messenger from the palace rode up to the patrol as they passed. He would carry the news. No doubt in the clangor and gossip it would grow and solidify, the queen and the runaway slave captured at the gates. A hard-faced captain walked at their side. He spat into the dust as he spoke without looking at either of them. "Orders are from the king," he said. "You will be brought before him at dawn. Until then, you are in the king's custody." He wanted to snarl, to pull until the cord snapped and throw himself between Faderera and every spear they carried. Instead he walked with a kind of awful stillness. The ropes were a metronome marking time to a doom neither of them could avoid. At the courtyard of the palace, as they were pushed through the gate and back beneath the carved archways that had swallowed us a fortnight before, the smell hit me, smoke from the kitchens, the sharp copper scent of oil lamps, a faint metallic tang of blood. The palace did not feel like the same place. It felt colder, older, a thing that had waited for this, a scandal that could be hung up like a flag to announce its power. They threw them into a low storeroom where sacks of grain and barrels of oil made damp shadows. The soldiers bound them to a single post. Faderera's breath came in quick, shallow drafts. Her fingers trembled against the rope that cut into her wrists. "Badero." She tried to meet my eyes. Her voice was very small. "Forgive me." "Forgive you," he said, and he could hear the harshness in his own voice. "For what?" "For loving me." The words felt too big for the small room. She gave him a look that was both pleading and fierce. "For the danger I brought. For stealing you away. You brought me freedom for one night," he told her, "and the memory of dawn and that gilded road warmed me like an ember. That is more than anything ever offered me." There was pounding at the outer door, a furious hammering. Someone shouted outside. Voices raised, urgent. For a moment he thought perhaps a rescue, maybe an ally had seen through Morinike's snare and come to them. He strained his neck, the ropes biting deep, to listen. The door burst open and a woman they all knew too well stepped in, robes sweeping like a shadow. Morinike filled the doorway with a smile that showed nothing of mercy. "Oh, how the brave fall," she said, voice honeyed. Her eyes danced across Faderera's bound wrists, across his, and finally settled on the guards standing in the doorway. "Bring them to the council chamber. Let the king see with what disgrace his youngest has stained the palace." She turned on a heel and left as if she had performed a noble duty. The sound of her laugh followed like a blade. Left in the dim of the storeroom, the reality of their capture closed round like a trapdoor. The ropes seemed suddenly as heavy as the iron of a shackle. The rough wood under my knees felt like a coffin lid. Faderera's head fell to my shoulder. Her breath was hot and hitching. "They will break me," she whispered. "They will make me say whatever they want to hear. I have been a queen in name only. They will use that weakness. They will not break you." He tried to be firm. Every inch of him ached with the urge to fight, to rend, to die before I let anyone harm her. "If they try, they'll do worse than that," she said. Her voice was thin and certain and absolutely terrifying. "There is a law in Ilujin. When a queen betrays the crown." "Don't," he said. His throat closed on the thought he would not finish. What they would do, whip, exile, worse, hung in the air like a thunderstorm waiting to break. She had left the gilding and the silks behind in flights of madness and love. Now they had returned, bundled in the ropes of their own hope, to the very walls they had fled. Outside, the night had settled as if nothing had happened. Crickets sang. A distant dog barked. Inside, the palace moved like an old, hungry animal rearranging the bones of its young. Somewhere a trumpet would sound at dawn. Someone would read a list. Someone would pronounce fate. He closed his eyes and felt the rope rasp at his skin. Faderera's fingers found his and squeezed, soft and fierce, like the last promise two people could make. "If they take you from me," she breathed, "I will not last a day. You will last long enough for me to find you." He promised. "If they chain you, I will break them. If they make you confess," he swallowed the rest. Words were small bulwarks against the tide that rose. They waited in the dark. Dawn, if it came, would be the moment of truth. Men in robes and crowns would pass judgment, and Morinike would sit with the patience of a viper, letting the council do the killing while she kept her hands clean. Outside, footsteps approached again. The patrol returned, not with the heavy-footed swagger of victory but with the tight, careful step of men who have delivered what they were paid to deliver. 2 captives, a scandal. They unbound their hands long enough to lift them. As they hauled them up, Faderera's cloak, thin and torn when they had fled, fell back and brushed the floor. The hem caught on a nail and ripped free. It looked suddenly very like a shroud. As they led them through the stone corridors once more, past tapestries that had hid their first secret kisses, past the fountain where we had once planned a life, each step felt like a small betrayal of everything they had stolen from the palace, and each beat of his heart felt like a drum beating to the rhythm of a sad story. They reached the council hall and were thrust into the center of a ring of faces, some skeptical, some eager, some already certain of our sin. High cushions were rolled out. The king was propped up on the throne supported by cushions. Morinike sat like a queen who had earned her crown by poison. Her smile was a funeral wreath, and the store queens stared at them almost emotionless. As the guards released them to stand before the council, he looked at Faderera. Her chin was up, her eyes did not waver. The queen he had loved, the woman who had bared her body in the bath for him, who had whispered his name and made him say hers, stood before a room full of vipers with his hand bound to hers by fate. This was the threshold they could not cross. Dawn edged the windows. Men rose and settled. A silence fell heavy as a curtain. When the elder counselor cleared his throat and spoke, his voice like dry grass, he felt something in him answer. It was not bravery. It was the terrible, honest courage of having nothing left to lose. State your case, the counselor said. Or be judged by the king. Faderera drew a breath. She met his eyes once, a look that said we still had choices, even here, and then she raised her voice for a world of stone to hear. I loved, she said simply. It was a dangerous confession, a bright and naked thing thrown into a field of spears. The chamber cracked like ice. Morinike's smile broke into a snarl. The room waited. The king coughed. The world closed like a fist. Chapter 20, Verdict of a Dying King. From Faderera's point of view, the council chamber was thick with heat and judgment. Every noble eye was upon her, upon Badero, upon the scandal they had dragged into the sacred walls of Ilujin. Her wrists burned from the ropes. Her lips trembled, but her voice had not failed me. I loved, she had said. The words still hung in the air, as heavy as thunderclouds. Morinike's sharp smile split her face like a blade. She leaned forward on her cushion, whispering to the guards as though to remind them of their duty. Treason, she hissed. A slave defiling the king's bed, a wife dishonoring the throne. There is no punishment great enough. The frail cough of the king cut through the chamber. The sound stilled every tongue. The old king, skin pale as ash, beard trembling, eyes clouded with sickness, lifted one thin hand. The gesture was small, but the hall froze. Even Morinike's words shriveled on her lips. Bring them forward, he rasped. The guards obeyed, shoving she and Badero closer to the dais. Her knees shook as the king peered down at them. His breath rattled in his chest, and his hand gripped the arm of his chair like a man clinging to life. Faderera, he said at last, voice low but clear. My youngest, my gift from a father who wanted land more than your happiness. His words pierced her. Her throat closed, her heart beating so loud she thought all could hear it. He turned his gaze to Badero, his sunken eyes flickering with something I could not name, pity, perhaps, or the dim echo of his own youth. And you, the slave with the voice like thunder, the one who sings when he labors. I have heard of you. Don't think I haven't, and sometimes your voice soothes the ache in my heart when I think of my deeds over the years. Badero bowed his head but said nothing. She could feel the tremor of his body through the ropes that bound them together. The council shifted, impatient, expectant. They wanted condemnation. They wanted bloodshed. The king coughed again, spitting crimson red blood into a cloth. When he looked up, his voice was stronger, as though anger or memory had roused him. All of you cry for death, he said, eyes sweeping across the council, across Morinike, who paled under his gaze. But I am old. I have known wives more than I can count on one finger, sons who will rule after me, daughters who will carry my legacies to their husband's house, victories that left me empty. And now, when I sit at the edge of the grave, I see two before me who dared to grasp what many never had the courage to. Silence fell so deep that the crackle of the oil lamps seemed deafening. Love, the king whispered. Love, even when forbidden. Love, even when the world called it treason. Tell me, which of you in this chamber has known such a passion? We are stuck in our old ways of arranged marriages, giving our daughters hands for lands, wealth and power. Forcing our sons for political gains. No one spoke. The king's chest rose and fell, ragged, but he lifted his hand again, commanding. Release them. Gasps echoed. The guards hesitated, but his voice sharpened. Release them, I said. The ropes fell from their wrists. Her arms sagged with sudden freedom. She turned to Badero, wide-eyed, disbelieving. His hand found hers instantly, gripping tight, as though to remind her this was real. The king leaned back against his throne, eyes closing briefly before fluttering open again. You will not die here. You will not live in my palace, either. Leave Ilujin. Go beyond the rivers, beyond the forests. Take your love far from my kingdom. That is my judgment. I have been fair enough, and I hope this last good deed can wipe away my sins of the past years. Morinike shot to her feet, her face twisted in fury. My king. This is weakness. This is betrayal of the laws. Enough. The king's roar, though cracked with age, struck like a spear. His frail body shook with the force of it. You speak of laws. I am the law in Ilujin. And I choose mercy. Morinike's lips pressed tight. She sat, her eyes burning holes into the young lovers. The king's hand trembled as he pointed toward the open doors of the council chamber. Go, tonight, before the dawn paints the sky. Let no man of Ilujin stop you. And should anyone try, they defy their king's last decree. His words rang final, like the closing of a great drum. They left that chamber hand in hand, their steps unsteady, hearts pounding with disbelief. The palace guards did not stop us. The nobles did not dare speak. Even Morinike, silent with venom, could do nothing but watch. Beyond the gates, the night still stretched before us, the same road that had nearly devoured us now lay open, wide and waiting. Badero turned to her, his voice thick with awe and relief. We are free. Tears spilled down my cheeks. She leaned into him, voice breaking. Free, and together, they walked into the darkness as dawn stirred on the horizon. Behind them, Ilujin and its chains faded into shadow. Before them, a new life awaited, uncertain, but theirs. And for the first time since she became the king's wife, she felt alive. Epilogue. Far from Ilujin Aodero town. 10 years later. The town of Aodero lay where the river bent like a silver bracelet, its banks lined with palm groves and cassava fields. The marketplace was lively, but not with the thunder of Ilujin's drums. Here the laughter was softer, the air freer. Faderera stood at the threshold of their home, her wrapper tied low, her hair plaited and threaded with cowries. She watched her 2 children tumble through the dust, her son who had an unremarkable resemblance to his father with his strong jaw, and daughter who took after her mother with her mother's quick eyes. Their shrieks of joy filled the air as they chased each other. Slow down, you will knock the calabash over, she called, though her voice carried more amusement than warning. From the shade of a low tree, Badero strummed a talking drum, its rhythm playful and teasing. His voice, deep and warm, rose in song, a song that had once echoed through Ilujin's slave yards, but now carried across a free town as music of his own choosing. He had thrived as a seasoned and famous singer in all of Aodero, and he is doing well for himself and his family. His wife, once the Queen Faderera, who had loved to weave mats as a young girl, had learned and mastered the trade from an old mat weaver in Aodero. The old woman later passed after 3 years of their stay in the village. Since then Faderera had been the one and famous mat weaver in the community and its environs. The children clapped and danced to his beat, their laughter rising with the sound. Faderera's heart swelled. She crossed the yard, laying a hand on her husband's shoulder. His skin was still hard with labor, but his eyes had softened in the years since they had fled. Do you remember, she said softly, the night at the western gate? When we thought the world had ended? Badero smiled, pulling her down beside him. I remember, he murmured. And I remember the king who chose mercy when he could have chosen death. I think of him often. Faderera nodded, her gaze drifting to their children. Perhaps he gave us this life. Perhaps the gods placed a spark of compassion in him at the last moments of his days. Badero leaned close, brushing his lips against her temple. No, Faderera, you gave us this life, your courage, your defiance, your love. She closed her eyes, leaning into him, the warmth of his body grounding her. The years had not changed the love and passion they felt for each other, but their bond had grown stronger. In the distance, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in fire and gold. Their children laughed, their home stood firm, and the ghosts of Ilujin were far behind. They had found not only freedom, but a future. And as the first stars pricked the heavens, Faderera whispered the words that had carried them through every trial. Free, and together. The end. Thank you for listening to Faderera and Badero's love story. Please subscribe to have access to more stories like this. Also, don't forget to share with your friends and family so we can be encouraged to continue giving you stories of love, enchantment and happily ever afters in our villages.